Hello, everyone. How are you doing this week? Are you ready for week 7? Assignment slated for August the 17th. This will be our second assignment since the midterm. So I hope everybody's ready for this next lady who's we're gonna show you that she has ruled the longest than any woman queen in history and more than most men. So it should be very exciting. Again, this is stated for August the 17th. Okay, so let me do my usual techniques here. Share the screen, go to the materials, slideshow from the beginning. I hit it till we see the acronym. There it is. Actually, it's a code. Code 106, HUM 106, which is for humanities. Lives of extraordinary women. Yes, we are concentrating on women this quarter. I asked you, everybody said that was good. So I'm glad you're enjoying the stories about the ladies. It is true history. So without further ado, let me proceed and get into this. Okay, so we're going to talk about Queen Victoria. This is she's more recent, so there's actually a real photo of her. A lot of these ladies, they're hundreds of years ago. You get paintings, drawings. So she was Queen of England, aka the United Kingdom. All right. So Victoria, Alexandrina Victoria, born May 24th, 1819, died January 22nd, 1901, was Queen of the United Kingdom of Britain and Ireland from June 20, 1837, until her death in 1901. Her reign, which means the length of her queenship, was 63 years and 216 days. It's known as the Victorian era. So they even named the era after her, and was longer than any of her predecessors. Predecessors means the kings or queens who came before her. It was a period of industrial, political, scientific, and military change within the United Kingdom. Yes, all those things, because it was coming into a modern era, coming out of the past, the old past, and was marked by a great expansion of the British Empire. Yes, they expanded a lot during her time. That was one of her goals. In 1876, the British Parliament voted to grant her the additional title of Empress of India, because yes, Britain expanded into India. Victoria was daughter of Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathearn, the fourth son of King George III. Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. After the deaths of her father and grandfather in 1820, she was raised under close supervision by her mother and comptroller, John Conroy. She inherited the throne at age 18 after her father's 3 elder brothers died without surviving a legitimate issue. Boy, talk about being lucky for your position. But you lost 3 uncles. I wonder if she was close to any of them. Victoria, a constitutional monarch, attempted privately to influence government policy and ministerial appointments. Publicly, she became a national icon who was identified with strict standards of personal morality. Well, that can be debated. I mean, as you have seen, uh, let's say just in this quarter where we studied women from different countries who became prime ministers, queens, you know, you name it, they might have done, let's say, a lot of good things for people, but they also did bad things. So, or they themselves were not of a high character. Yet, Victoria was identified as someone with personal high morality. So, what I've learned studying these, and men kings too, is that we have a saying in the United States. It's ultimate power ultimately or corrupts ultimately. So, and it's just a natural thing with humans, doesn't matter you're male or female. Once you have the ultimate power to do what you really want to do, or you can do anything, usually people given that power, they do a lot of bad things, or they don't have a high personal morality. It's, I guess, kind of hard not to, if you could do what you want, right? Ultimately, I mean, businesses, governments, you name it. So she just follows the role of anybody else. Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha in 1840. There are 9 children married into royal and noble families across the continent, earning Victoria the sobriquet, which is a nickname. That's an old word that's disappearing in the English language. I don't hear it anymore. The grandmother of Europe. After Albert's death in 1861, Victoria plunged into deep mourning. Mourning is when you're grieving over your dead loved one, and avoided public appearances. She was really emotionally destroyed, too sad to make public appearances. As a result of her seclusion or hiding, British republicanism temporarily gained strength. So see, that's going against the crown. But in the latter half of her reign, her popularity recovered somehow. Her golden and diamond jubilees were times of public celebration. Victoria died in 1901 at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight at the age of 81. Again, just a remarkable age for most people to live at that time. The British monarch, the House of Hanover, she was succeeded by her son Edward VIII of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Now we're going to talk about accession and marriage. Accession is when she takes the crown. Victoria receives the news of her accession from Lord Conyngham, left. So this is him. This is her at the very young age, a teenager. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, William Howley. And painting was by Henry Tanworth Wells, 1887. Victoria turned 18 on the 24th of May, 1837, and regency was avoided. Less than a month later, on June 20, 1837, William IV died at the age of 71, and Victoria became Queen of the United Kingdom. So, like I said, at 18. In her diary, she wrote, "I was awoke at 6 o'clock by Mama, who told me the Archbishop of Canterbury and Lord Conyngham were here and wished to see me. I got out of bed and went into my sitting room, only in her dressing gown, which I guess now would be compared to a sleeping gown, and alone saw them. Lord Conyngham then acquainted me that my poor uncle, the king, was no more." Again, these uncles dying. I have to wonder, 3 at one time. and had expired at 12 minutes past 2 this morning, and consequently that I am queen, it is stated in her diary. Official documents prepared on the first day of her reign described her as Alexandrina Victoria, but the first name was withdrawn at her own wish and not used again. So she said, no more of this Alexandrina. Just call me Victoria, right? Since 1714, Britain had shared a monarch with Hanover and Germany, but under Salic law, women were excluded from the Hanoverian succession. Victoria inherited the British throne. Her father's unpopular brother, Ernest Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, became King of Hanover. He was Victoria's heir, who would succeed her, presumptive until she had a child. So as soon as she had a child, she could prevent him from possibly taking over for her, right? Here's a painting of her at that time. At the time of Victoria's accession, the government was led by the Whig Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne. He at once became a powerful influence on the politically inexperienced monarch, meaning her. She had no experience being a queen, so young, and who relied on him for advice. So she went to him for any issues that she had. Charles Greville supposed that the widowed and childless Melbourne was passionately fond of her as he might be of his daughter if he had had one. Victoria probably saw him as a father figure. Her coronation took place on the 28th of June, 1838, at Westminster Abbey. Over 400,000 visitors came to London for the celebrations. Okay. And she became famous and resided at Buckingham Palace. She lived, inherited the revenues of the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall, as well as being granted a civil list allowance of £385,000 per year. Financially prudent, she paid off her father's debt. So when you're prudent, how can I give you a modern, because it doesn't even say here how she was, right? But somehow she was, and then she paid off that. And I'm sure the debt was really, really high. These people don't have debts like I owe you $50 or I owe you $1,000. It's pretty high. But if you're prudent, okay, let's say, okay, we'll try to make this present and relevant, because I think prudence is a very important word, because I know a lot of you guys, when people speak slang, they say either someone, like, or anybody that doesn't spend what they think is a lot, they'll say, oh, they're cheap. No, cheap is bad. Cheap is not good. But there's more than, being cheap. So I'll give you a personal advice, right? For example, I had a student years ago, a young guy, and Koreatown through the years has gotten more and more expensive to rent apartments. I'll give you a list, since I've taught in Koreatown for a number of schools for many different years. So let's say 2004, a one bedroom in K-Town, like 4th and Ardmore, was $725, a one bedroom. And it was roomy, kitchen, dining area, restroom, large bedroom, living room, $725. But it's almost 20 years ago, okay? 2004. Now I understand one bedrooms can go from 1,600 to 2,000 a month. Okay, so that's a little more than double to way more than double. Okay. So he was struggling paying rent, and he got this new pretty girlfriend who loved the rich lifestyle. And he had to take her to expensive Korean restaurants. That's all she accepted. And she liked to drink and she ordered a lot of alcohol. I think one of her favorites was Chosun Galbi, right? And she would never go to the lunch special. So he was spending a hell of a lot of money to make her happy and take her to these expensive dinners. Now, unfortunately, that caused him to have trouble paying his rent and paying his utilities and paying his car, right? He could have taken her to nice places that didn't cost as much or, spend so much because, you can get a bottle of soju at the market for $3.95, $4, and then at the Korean restaurant, it's going to be 15 to 18. So, yeah. So if she would allow him, if he could have been prudent, he could have taken her to nice restaurants, given her nice food, and not have to struggle with his rent. Okay, so that's prudent is a very good thing. Okay, it has nothing to do with being cheap. Okay, that's your civics lesson for today, cultural lesson. Back to the story. At the start of her reign, Victoria was popular. Her reputation suffered in an 1839 court intrigue, mystery, when one of her mother's ladies in waiting, Lady Flora Hastings, developed an abdominal growth that was widely rumored to be an out-of-wedlock pregnancy by Sir John Conroy. That's an interesting way to put it. A abdominal growth, like saying that, oh, she had a stomach tumor, but it was so big, obviously. They're saying that's the rumor that she said, but she was pregnant. Right? Victoria believed the rumors. She hated Conroy and despised that odious Lady Flora because she had conspired or worked with Conroy and the Duchess of Kent in the Kensington system. At first, Lady Flora refused to submit to an intimate medical examination, so they were going to find out. We're going to send the doctors, and we're going to do a medical examination and see if you are pregnant and not lying about this abdominal growth. Until mid-February, she eventually acquiesced, which is a high-level word for give in or give her consent. And listen to this, was found to be a virgin. So it was abdominal tumor. Victoria was wrong here. Conroy, the Hastings family, and the opposition Tories organized a press campaign implicating the Queen, means, accusing her in the spreading of false rumors about Lady Flora. Lady Flora died in July. The postmortem revealed a large tumor on her liver that had actually distended her abdomen. Distended means actually pushed it out. So it did resemble like possibly she was pregnant. So it was a terrible, terrible thing. That's what she died of. Sad. At public appearances, Victoria was hissed and jeered as Miss Melbourne. Okay, so hissed is from the verb to hiss, and that comes from what cats do, right? And people can do that too. They mimic the cat, and it's always a negative way. Someone says, "Hi, I'm very popular here," and then people go, you know. So it's a negative response, and then jeered is a negative form of yelling. You can yell positively, "Go Lakers, go!" Or you can say, "You suck. You guys are terrible. You are bums." That's jeering. Okay. 1839, Melbourne resigned after radicals and Tories, both of whom Victoria detested, which means hated, voted against a bill to suspend the Constitution of Jamaica. The bill removed political power from plantation owners who were resisting measures associated with the abolition of slavery. The abolition of slavery means the end, the destruction of slavery. The Queen commissioned a Tory, Robert Peel, to form a new ministry. At the time, it was customary for the Prime Minister to appoint members of the royal household, who were usually his political allies and their spouses. Many of the queen's ladies of the bedchamber were wives of Whigs. Remember, those are the people in the political power. And Peel expected to replace them with the wives of Tories, the opposite political group. And what became known as the bedchamber crisis, Victoria, advised by Melbourne, objected to their removal. Peel refused to govern under the restrictions imposed by the Queen and consequently resigned his commission, which means the position that he was given, allowing Melbourne to return to office. Marriage of Victoria and Albert, painted by George Hayter. Though Victoria was now queen, as an unmarried young woman, she was required. What do you think? She was required to get a driver's license? What was she required to do? She was required by social convention or the social laws of the time to live with her mother. Despite their differences over the Kensington system and her mother's continued reliance on Conroy. Her mother was consigned to a remote apartment in Buckingham Palace, and Victoria often refused to see her. Just refused. When Victoria complained to Melbourne in Buckingham Palace, and Victoria often, that her mother's proximity or closeness promised torment or torture she felt for her for many years. Called a shocking alternative, Victoria showed interest in Albert's education for the future role he would have to play as her husband, but she resisted attempts to rush into wedlock. So she was still trying not to get married. Okay? Oh, yeah. So she didn't even want to live near her mom. That would just be too much. You would think just being alone is cool. You know, your mom's down the street, but even that was too much. Victoria continued to praise Albert following his second visit in 1839. In Albert, Victoria felt mutual affection, and the Queen proposed to him. Wow, that was unheard of at the time, but she wanted to marry him October 15th, 1839. Just 5 days after he arrived at Windsor. They were married on February 10th, 1840, in the Chapel Royal of St. James Palace, London. Victoria was love-struck. She spent the evening after their wedding lying down with a headache, but wrote ecstatically in her diary. Uh-oh. Again, folks, what do you think she's going to? Ecstatically means super, super happy. It's almost like you can't contain it, right? Let's see. I'm scared, but let's see what she wrote here. Dooby-dooby-doo. So this is from Victoria's diary, the morning after her wedding night. I never spent such an evening. My dearest dear Albert, his excessive love. Excessive love? It's more than enough. And affection gave me feelings of heavenly love and happiness I never could have hoped to have felt before. He clasped me in his arms and we kissed each other again and again. Oh dear. His beauty, his sweetness and gentleness. Really, how can I ever be thankful enough to have such a husband? Doesn't sound like modern ladies now. To be called by names of tenderness I have never yet heard used to me before was bliss, young lady. So bliss is the highest form of happiness that you can have. And then she says, oh, oh, this was the happiest day of my life. Can we continue? It's so emotional. I think I might have a breakdown. I don't know. Do I need a coffee? Oh dear. Okay, I'll try to be strong for my students. Continue. Albert became an important political advisor as well as the Queen's companion, replacing Melbourne as the dominant, influential figure in the first half of her life. Victoria's mother was evicted from the palace, which is a nice way of saying kicked out, to Ingester House in Belgrave Square. After the death of Victoria's aunt, Princess Augusta, in 1840, Victoria's mother was given both Clarence and Frogmore houses. Through Albert's mediation, which means he handled the affairs, he was the middleman, relations between mother and daughter slowly improved. So somehow, by talking to his wife and then his mother-in-law, they got along a little better. My guess is that the mom kind of liked him, I guess. She didn't, she wouldn't listen to him. Contemporary lithograph of Edward Hawkesworth's attempt to assassinate Victoria, 1840. So they tried to kill her here as she was taking a stroll in this horse and carriage. They tried to shoot her. That's just one of many. During Victoria's first pregnancy in 1840, in the first few months of the marriage, 18-year-old Edward Oxford attempted to assassinate her while she was riding in a carriage with Prince Albert on her way to visit her mother. Oxford fired twice, but either both bullets missed, or as he later claimed, the guns had no shot. So why is he shooting? No shot means no bullet. Why is he shooting a gun with no bullets? Very strange. He was tried for both high treason. So treason is when it's like the highest crime against your own country, usually soldiers who, let's say, join the other side and then fight against their own country. That's treason, right? So they said, hey, you try to kill the queen, so that's treason. And found guilty by reason of insanity. So they felt he was crazy, right? Committed to an insane asylum indefinitely, so meaning the rest of his life, and later sent to live in Australia. Well, that's good. They changed that. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, Victoria's popularity soared, or it went higher. So she survived this death attempt, and she got more popular. Mitigating residual discontent over the Hastings affair and the bedchamber crisis. So, excuse me, she became so popular, it's mitigating, it means that people kind of forgot about the Hastings affair and the bedchamber crisis, which we talked about earlier. Lucky for her, politically. Her daughter, also named Victoria, was born on the 22nd of November, 1840. The Queen hated being pregnant, viewed breastfeeding with disgust. I wonder why. Just like what if she was breastfed by her mom? I don't understand. It's supposed to be a natural, beautiful thing when a mother breastfeeds a daughter, but she found it disgusting. Daughter. And thought newborn babies were ugly. Well, that's interesting. My view on that is, yes, I've seen a couple, most babies are the cutest things you'll ever see, but I've seen a couple of babies that maybe were a little ugly, but traditionally, let's just say this is an example. Let's just say there's a baby that's an ugly baby. Mothers always love their babies no matter what they look like. So very strange. But anyway, the different people have different thinking. So, nevertheless, over the following 17 years, she and Albert had a further 8 children. Oh my God! Well, For a lady that thinks babies are ugly and she doesn't like to breastfeed, why did she have so many kids? Interesting. Albert Edward, 1841. Alice, 1843. Alfred, 1844. Helena, 1846. Louise, 1848. Arthur, 1850. Leopold, 1853. And Beatrice, 1857. So to me, I guess maybe she didn't like having babies, but she liked being pregnant because she spent most of these years being pregnant. Not too much rest, like one after the other. Again, interesting. The household was largely run by Victoria's childhood governess, Baroness Louise Lesson from Hanover. Lesson had been a formative influence on Victoria and had supported her against the Kensington system. Albert, however, thought that Lesson was incompetent and that her mismanagement threatened his daughters, am I thinking about the LA Daughters' health. After a furious row is a British word for fight, like an argument fight between a husband and wife. You know, here we'll say, he's fighting with his wife or he's arguing with his wife. And then in England, they'll say he had a row with his wife. That's what that means. So after a furious fight between Victoria and Albert over the issue, Lesson was pensioned off in 1842. And Victoria's close relationship with her ended. So didn't want to do bad things to her, but they said, okay, I guess it's a firing, but in a kind way, give her money, and then she doesn't work there anymore. So in our book, there is the drawing of her when she was older. Again, you see she showing this map, which is depicting how she increased Great Britain's empire all over the world, and books that she read, maybe had diaries, the flag of England, which I don't know if you know is called the Union Jack or medal, and these sweet things that she liked to eat. So let's get into the main book here. Secretly amusing. Amusing is a word for funny. Victoria, born in London, England, 1819, died on the Isle of Wight, England, 1901. Queen of England for 64 years. Like I said, the longest reigning. Gotta give it to her. The longest royal lifetime in history, and that's for men too. So men can't even compete kings for the length of monarchy. So I salute you. Victoria's first act as queen at age 18 was to move her bed out of her domineering mother's room. Say she just had to get away from her mom. Domineering is another way of saying bossy, telling your daughter what to do for 99.9% of the things that she does. A miserable childhood, which means terrible, long suffering, had toughened her, but it made her a tough woman, even as a young woman. After she inherited the throne, she became extremely wealthy, with 445 servants to manage. Just for servants. Sounds like having that number of servants in the Great Wall in China, right, a Forbidden City. Most of whom revered her. Now look at that. It says they really revered her, which means highly respected her. And free to display her iron will in an era or time when women were supposed to appear delicate and weak. So iron will, if you don't know what will is that determination a person, man or woman, can have that will make them strong enough not to bend their thinking and change their mind. And she was free to do, I guess, even if she had an iron will, she was not supposed to show it. Right? That was for men to do. That's what it was thought of at the time. So it's often been said if you're really addicted to smoking, you smoked for a number of years, maybe 2 packs a day. It's a lot of people have said it's worse than kicking let's say, a cocaine habit. So they say you have to have an iron will to stop because the minute you lose it, then you're back to smoking again. So she showed her iron will in many political fields, as we'll see. And then this is interesting. Many women put leeches behind their ears to drain the blood and whiten their cheeks. I actually brought up leeches last week, and those are, like I said, you go through a dirty stream, a dirty lake, a dirty river, you come out of it on the other side, and you've got these things that are like worms, and they're sucking the blood out of your legs. Those are leeches. And I told you what we discovered before is, like, if some people had, like, I guess, something similar to high blood pressure, they would put them, men or women, put them on their chest and think if it drew the blood out, the blood pressure would drop. This is before modern medicine. So here it says women put them behind their ears to drain the blood, but it's not really stating this, and then whiten their cheeks. So um, I'm guessing women are not supposed to look like a flushed face when you're angry. You're supposed to look weak and delicate. So no, thank you. Okay. We are not amused. She once said after a guest told a racy story at dinner. Her words plunged the room into dead silence. So we are not amused. It's like saying this is not funny. And a racy story is what we would call today a dirty story. Like today, you go on YouTube. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but most women comics now, they say the dirtiest jokes. They're really more than racy. And so, but at this time, they didn't like hearing that. So she said, this is not funny. Though respectable and prim in public, like the Victorian age name for her, she could be witty, that means funny, and down to earth in private. She had a silvery chuckle. So, chuckle is that kind of tiny laugh. I don't know how you call that silvery. I could hear someone saying, "Oh, because that's a big laugh." So, but she had a silvery chuckle and could laugh until she cried, her whole body shaking. So I guess if she actually found something funny, she's one of those people that just would laugh for the longest time until she cried and her whole body would shake. I knew a guy that laughed and the windows rattled. I thought we were going to have an earthquake. He was a big guy. Uh, that was Victoria. On the job, Victoria blossomed. Blossom is like a flower, so it means that on the job she just did fantastically, right? The queen will not be dictated to, which means she's telling everybody, nobody will tell me what to do. She said to anyone who tried, sweeping all the objects off her desk or stamping her feet for effect. Sweeping sounds kind of like that. So what they're trying to say is, let's say her table is dishes and candles and objects, and she would just swing her arm really fast, whap, and knock all the things off. So that's more stronger than sweeping. But of course, stamping her feet, for effect. And then in her diary, she said, I delight in this work. And she kept this diary her whole life. So these ways of acting tough and strong and yelling, she really loved it because it made her feel powerful, I presume. She commanded respect, even from those who judged her by her appearance. It says here, a more homely little being you never beheld. Okay, so just as this is interesting for you to learn this word homely. Okay. Remember, she said all babies are ugly. right? Which I don't agree with, but anyway, homely is actually better than, if they were making categories, it's actually better than being ugly, if you can believe that. It's just like they call what is the word they use now? Plain. Someone says, "Oh, is that girl pretty?" No. Is she cute? No. She's kind of homely, which means very, very plain, right? It doesn't mean ugly. It doesn't. It's just kind of like there's no striking beauty to her. I guess I've seen some magazines where they show some famous ladies who you see on the TV, and they have professional makeup artists, and the ladies look fantastic, beautiful. And then you see them without makeup and they look kind of homely. It's like, is that the same person? Right? So so they're saying she was actually a homely, mature woman and little, so she was small. Maybe that's the revenge because she picked on babies. I don't know. She delayed marriage because she dreaded the possibility of no longer getting her own way, but eventually wed Albert, a penniless German prince. That's interesting. How can you be a German prince and have no money? Not even a penny. Are you still a prince? I don't understand that. And then what it means no longer getting her own way is that if she wed, maybe they would treat the man as like a king, and then he could actually go against her and stop some of her wishes. She worried about that. But Albert, to her, he is perfection. He's perfect. She wrote raving about his exquisite or high beauty. She felt he was so handsome. And he's perfect. So they worked at adjoining desks. So with him, he could sit next to her. She liked that. Lit by a green shaded reading lamp. Every morning, no matter how early she began work, she would find a neat stack of papers he had reviewed and arranged for her inspection. Above all, he kept her amused or entertained, happy, and was her best friend. So that was very important to her. Conscientious about each of her duties, which means she thought a lot about her duties. They were all important. They didn't pass her mind. The queen provided 9 heirs to the throne. Remember all those babies? Each night her children came before her one by one, so she could quiz them, do her best to manipulate their behavior, right? She wanted them to do things the way she wanted them done. So she had to speak with them privately. Her grandchildren were more apt or ready to remember her for hugs, peppermints, and circuses she brought to the palace. That's very interesting. If you study family psychology, it's a reoccurring theme that the children, as they become adults, will remember their parents as being really tough and not all that sweet. But then the grandkids will say, "Oh, grandma and grandpa were so kind and nice." So it's like, well, what's the answer to that? Well, why, And actually, the answers come from the grandparents. They always said, well, our kids, we had to raise them and get tough. But our grandkids were brought over for a short time. So we just spoil them and then they go back to their parents. So we don't have to raise them. And then that's why the grandkids being spoiled is like this. They remember hugs, peppermints, and circuses, right? Nothing tough. Interesting. And that's from any culture. Uh, Victoria relaxed at Balmoral, which you'd always hear with, Prince Harry and the Queen and all that stuff. Balmoral. So this started way back in the day, which was a 70-room retreat she bought. Victoria was the first one to buy this. fleeing London after 7 attempts on her life. So she did not feel safe in London. 7 different times, people tried to kill her. So she wanted to escape. And this Balmoral was in the remote highlands of Scotland, very far away. Actually, now another country. She loved hiking through the wild countryside, muddying her boots. So if there was mud, she jumped in there with her boots. And then pausing or stopping to draw detailed sketches. So maybe she had some talent as a sketch artist. I have not seen any of her work. At night, she read novels. The famous Jane Austen was a favorite author. Or sat at her spinning wheel. Someone read poetry to her. A plate of pralines. So pralines are candied pecans. Very tasty. I like them myself, but they have thousands of calories. So it's like pieces of a pecan pie almost. And fondant cookies, which we saw in the picture, and a glass of whiskey nearby. So she was not drinking the famous cold milk and sweets, but a glass of whiskey and sweets. That's a strong, strong lady. She loved food. The richer, the better. She ate it fast and often. Why she ate so fast, I don't know, but she got heavy. She got older. Playing solitaire, which is a card game that you can play by yourself. Also, but when she played, if she won, she was happy. If not, she got upset. How do you lose to a stack of cards? She cultivated her domestic side by embroidering vests or sewing for Albert and sewing a quilt for each grandchild. Closets overflowed with satin gowns, which means she had too many, and dainty accessories. She was somewhat old-fashioned and preferred candlelight to electricity, writing by hand to the typewriter. Didn't like using the typewriter, which now people, when you have a computer, if some guy says, hey, I prefer the old typewriter, they think he's old. So in her time, they thought she was old-fashioned because I'd rather write by hand. And she didn't have a new modern pen. You know, you're talking about the bird feather that you dip in the ink. And the traditional paper square instead of the new toilet paper rolls. I've seen some of those old toilet paper squares. They look pretty rough, but she didn't want the new toilet paper rolls. Protestant, which was her religion. She was tolerant of other religions and she found racism intolerable. Albert did have at least one flaw. He was not strong physically. Poor Albert. And he died after catching a cold while scolding his oldest son in the rain. So the son must have done something bad. The father stayed out there to tell him, you're a bad boy, and he caught a cold and died. I guess he had what we would call now a weak immune system. The shock overwhelmed Victoria, a widow at 42, and she never entirely forgave her son. Her son's fault that her lovely husband had died. She preserved every detail of Albert's room, kept a plaster cast of his hand in her bed, I guess so that she could put her hand in it and it felt like she was possibly holding his hand, which she probably did every night when they went to sleep, and wore his picture on a chain around her neck. Now that's, people have done that, high school kids, but she often was holding it up so he could see. So I guess imagine she was in the palace and she stood on the balcony and she looked out to a beautiful sunset, and then she would pick up the picture on the necklace and then point the picture towards the sunset and say, hey, honey, can you see it was a beautiful day today? I miss you, etc. So she was very melancholy, a romantic melancholy person. She began to dabble in the occult, which means play around a little bit with the mysteries of the occult, holding seances and appointing her own royal psychic. So seances is when you have a psychic, they try to bring back the spirit of your dead loved ones so you can speak to them. Inspiring oceans of gossip about a secret marriage, she became close to John Brown, Albert's handsome Scottish servant, to help her feel near the spirit of her husband. The queen took years to resume her public duties. So she was sad for a number of years, did not return to official queen duties until a few years, right? She had to get over the grieving of her sweet Albert. Eventually regaining her toughness and finding things amusing or entertaining again, Victoria sailed on for another 40 years as her country became the most powerful in the world. Until a few days before she died, at age 82, after a stroke, she was, they should say, still conducting business. So here we have the after portion. One of Victoria's preoccupations or worries was finding suitable mates for her children, grandchildren, and 37 great-grandchildren. Oh my God. Just to worry about finding husbands or wives for all those kids. Marrying them into every royal family in Europe freed her reign of virtually all threats of war. Most members of today's European monarchies are related to Victoria. Today's. So what they're trying to say is this was a very common thing done, not to the extent that she succeeded with it, but let's say, for example, France and England had many times in the past, they were enemies and fought each other with these great wars. If you remember Joan of Arc, right, we read about her. So what Europeans try to do is say, hey, the queen has a daughter or the king has a daughter in England. Why doesn't he marry the king of France's son? And that way with a family tie, and then they have kids, we won't fight each other, right? Because we have relatives on both sides. So her goal was to have all these kids marry into all the royal families, so nobody would be angry or want to fight England. Right? It's a strategy. Consider my vocation or job as queen to be that of trying to do good in the world, Victoria wrote. Yet her policies poisoned England's relations with Ireland. And she failed to help those who suffered through the Industrial Revolution, right? So in her own country, during the Industrial Revolution, she didn't help people because, as you see, 30,000 children lived on London's streets. So she was violently opposed to giving women the vote. Here's this strong woman says, don't let women vote, but I'm the queen. That's why I said in the beginning about this morality. It's like some good and some bad. Feminists, she claimed, ought to get a good whipping, which means an actual whipping with a whip, not a wet noodle. And women were deemed or felt to be not fitted to be queens. And then so she acted, it says she put on a show of disliking her duty, so she acted like she didn't like it. But remember, in her diary, she enjoyed it. Ironically, her very public role as a working mother strengthened the women's rights movement. They used her as a symbol. See, women can work and still be powerful, even though she hated feminists. Again, strange duality. Committed to expanding England into an empire on which the sun never set, she took over a quarter of the globe, 1/4 of the world. Places all over in Texas, Canada, Antarctica, Africa have been named after her. Victoria Falls in Africa, Victoria, Canada. Victoria's name even graces a chain of stores that sell underwear. So what they're trying to say there, ladies, if some of you know, Victoria's Secret. I never knew that. I've seen pictures of Victoria. I don't want to know her secret if this is her, but I don't know. Okay, now the reading is done. We can move on to the questions. Queen Victoria. Number one, what was the first thing Victoria did as queen? Did she have a rave, a party, and got drunk? What did she do? Two, in public, Victoria displayed an iron will. In private, how was she? The same. Three, why did she delay marriage? Four, she finally married Albert, a penniless German prince. What did he do for her above all? Find that in there. Five, what was Balmoral and why did Victoria flee or escape there? Six, what was Victoria's religion and what did she think of other religions? Was she a Muslim? Was she a Buddhist? And what did she think of other religions? Seven, what happened to Prince Albert? Did he run away, marry another woman? Eight, how did Victoria remember Albert? Nine, what did Victoria write about her vocation or her position as queen? And 10, the final question, what was she violently opposed to? Okay. So we finished the reading. These are the questions. Okay, so back to previous. Stop share. All right, folks. So I hope you enjoyed Queen Victoria for week 7. Again, scheduled for August the 17th. Okay. So take care, everyone. Try to withstand the heat. August is the hottest month in California and LA. And we'll be out of it soon. Okay. So until then, I will talk to you in a few weeks. Okay. Or actually next week, but see you for the final. Okay. So take care. Bye-bye.